All right, today we're going to be diving into technical session number 16, note-taking and documenting. As we often state, we do jump around with these technical sessions in order to try to match them up as best we can with the other course material we are giving, so that you kind of are getting different layers of the same information rather being scattered and having to wait until the very end to have to piece everything together. So today, we're going to be talking about the all-important task of note-taking. Our objectives for this particular technical session are going to be to explain the role of note-taking when reading and resolving tickets, list the principles of effective note-taking and documenting tickets, and evaluate sample notes to determine how to improve the notes based on the criteria for success. Also, we will learn to write effective notes and documentation that capture a summary of a problem, the likely cause of the problem, and the solutions that we had implemented. Real quick, what skills do you think a good note taker would have? Good listening skills would be a good start. I like that. Good grammar. That's why I'm terrible at it. Organizing your thoughts. Very good. I would say fast writer and typer is helpful. Complete sentences. All right. So there's a lot of things that good note takers can do. Some people actually go to the extent of creating their own shorthand as they write, so that they can, it allows them to be more efficient and keep up, faster. Doctors are known for this when they don't do actual transcription from recordings and stuff like that. Transcriptionists in courtrooms. Interestingly, those machines that they use, they essentially create their own language when they're using it. So like if you're going to transcribe notes from an actual court proceeding, you need the exact transcriptionist who did it, because they've created their own language, essentially their own shorthand on how to document things. Or if that is not possible, you can find the person who trained them, because a lot of times transcriptionists will pass down these languages from one to another. So there is that method of creating your own shorthand, but eventually it does need to be transferred over to a more legible method where more than just you can understand what's going on, especially in an IT situation. A lot of good answers, though. I like it. All right. So here's our first note. Every time she tries to open Adobe, she gets an error. She cannot do any until issue is resolved. Is this a good note? Bad note? Okay note? How do we improve upon it? Based off of some of the stuff we were talking about yesterday with our ticketing systems. Yes, Evan.
It's not detailed. Like, we don't know that they tried to troubleshoot or anything.
Okay.
And did she try to use any other programs? It's kind of just one-sided, really.
Okay. I like it. Any other? Fidel saying, doesn't say what kind of error message. That would be kind of important, you think? If it's getting an error message every time, is it the same error message? Is it different error messages? If it's the same, what is it?
A little shorthand is a little confusing too, because it can mean more than one word.
Yeah, like what?
Like WK,
Could mean what?
week,
Week.
better work.
There you go. Week, work. Not MG. Can that be like message, manager?
Message.
Okay. Anything else in here sticking out to anybody? Look for the
She didn't
obvious.
put who.
Huh?
Are we supposed to put like who is having this issue on the note too?
Yeah. Who is she? Who's she? You know, I mean,
Should have written down the complete words instead of abbreviating it.
yeah, complete words instead of abbreviations. But she, like, if I'm following up on this and I just get, she tries to open Adobe. Who is she? Who do I follow up with? So that's another good one. Anything else?
How about what department?
Department, where
Maybe
does she work?
possible.
Yeah, a little more detailed information. What about Adobe? How many different products does Adobe produce? Adobe Photoshop, PDF reader. I mean, there's, you know, depending on the kind of company you're at, it would really determine where you would go looking to solve the problem. Like, is it just as simple as they can't open a PDF, or are they in the graphics design department and like their entire job function is shut down? So what is the specific program? You know, it's like every time I try to log in and do work in Microsoft, you know, is it Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Access, OneNote? You know, I mean, they're giving me a general answer, and we need more specifics to be able to try to help out with this issue. So this is a very good example of all the things you should not do in note taking. You shouldn't make abbreviations like this. You need to have details in there, you know, like who you're speaking to, what the problem is, you know, what is the program they're having issues with, what department they're in, contact information, like how do I get in touch with she? You know, is it via email, via phone? Do they work third shift and I work, you know, day shift, and I didn't and I don't know that? How am I supposed to convey to them that, you know, progress has been made on their ticket? So there's a lot of issues. I mean, this was real quick and easy to write. It probably means something to the person who wrote it, but anybody coming behind you and looking at this ticket, especially if this ticket is 3, 5, 6 months old, when you're trying to get to the, you know, bottom of a problem, you're not going to have any detailed information here. So here is another version of the same note. February 8th, 2016 at 2:34 p.m., Clara Jones. Each time Ms. Jones tries to open Adobe Acrobat Reader, she receives an application error. The issue is preventing her from completing her work. We agreed that the help desk would remote into her computer at 5:30 p.m. this evening to investigate this issue. It's not a whole lot more, you know, as far as writing, but the clarity between note 1 and note 2 is staggering. So we need to pay attention to this when we are documenting our findings, because we can't just think about it as if we're the only one who's going to be reading it. We need it to be able so that anybody who comes behind us can clearly identify what it is we're doing.
I think I was a cross between 1 and 2. I wasn't 2, but I wasn't 1. I knew that if I had to shorten something, it would be obvious shorten things like the month of the year, or things like that. I would not shorten words that don't make any sense. But everybody knows what everybody should know. You have to give a time and you have to give a name, because push comes to shove, without that, I can't even get back to the source. I got to get back to the source if I need more information or whatever the case. But I need to know the name of this situation. I mean, the name of the person and the time in which this situation happened. And I can always use that to go back to the source to get more information, especially if I don't get what I needed on that first go around. What you have, Evan?
Wouldn't you leave their contact information on the ticket too?
Okay. In most instances, if they're using a ticketing system like we talked about in previous class, then a lot of that information is generated because that's your computer. When you log onto your computer, you go to the ticket system, it knows that it's you. It gives me your location, your department, your personal information to get back to you. But if you picked up the phone, Evan, and received this call, then you are the source of generating the necessary information. Sure, you can try to use the call ID if it's industry enterprise setting and try to match up when that call came in with the name. If your enterprise, your organization has it set up that way. But at the end of the day, those are things you want to start off with. Hey, I'm such and such. I work in such and such. This is going on with me. And be honest with you. And Mark said it once, and I think a couple of you all said it. First question that if I can interject is, how long has this been happening? Because now I need to get some type of reference, some time reference. And you'll be surprised a lot of times if it's not a ID 10T error, a lot of times I'll get a call from Evan, and then Mark will call me, and then Alan will call me. Now I know, oh, this is enterprise, this organizational. Like, this issue is not just one person, it's affecting a lot of people. And if I can address it early, I can kind of curtail. That's a cool word. Curtail the issue, and make it not as bad as a problem as it started off. Mark, what do you have for us, sir?
Shouldn't the person that created this note have some sort of tie to this? I don't see who created it.
That is a fair point.
Fair point, and I'm hoping that the same person, for the sake of the exercise, I'm hoping that they're saying this is the difference between a good note and a bad note from the same person taking it. But ideally, we will know who you are too, especially on our team. I'll know that Evan took that first note and Louise took that second note, because Evan, he trips sometimes. He don't give me everything I need. So, but yes, you would normally have a way to direct it back to the tech, the help desk support specialist, whoever you are, to get more information if the message isn't done well enough to get started, for sure. Renzi, I see your hand up.
Yeah, the first note looks like something that I would write to myself. And then the second note is better. I think is something more that I would put in the record, like the ticket that goes to all of my coworkers and my supervisor. That first one seems like something I could write to myself. Like, yeah, this happened while I'm listening to my customer, my client. I could jot that down, and it's not as offensive if I say that to myself, right? I mean,
totally. And I get that. And Kelly's probably going to say the same thing I'm about to say, but even with that, even though you shorthanded it, I'm hoping that you have great recall, because some stuff was still missing, even in a shorthand setting, situation. Even if you attempted to just kind of abbreviate a lot of things, you probably could get through with some of those. If you'll go back to the previous slide, Kelly, you probably can get past message and work until a resolve but you don't know who she is. Like still, like you could, it's possible that you do, but Renzi, but a lot of times some of those things still will require you to do some recall. And I don't want to put even you in that situation to try to remember some key points. But I totally agree with that. That is something that I feel like would never make it into an official document, hopefully, but you'll be surprised. But and something that you just not jotted down on a sticky to get started. But even, you know, even with that, you want some more information, even just for yourself.
Absolutely. And I'm not gonna lie, when I first started out in transportation, my messages looked like note number one, overwhelmingly. Anybody who's been in transportation for any length of time realizes that very easily people will come back to you 5 years later and ask you what happened with a certain load.
Yep.
Because you're dealing with insurance issues and stuff like that. So 5 years later, and then you go back and you see a note like this, and you're like, oh man, I can't even
Piece it
begin
together
to remember what happened on that day 5 years ago. So you start to get a lot better with your note taking and stuff like that, because you start to realize that there's a history involved with a lot of that stuff, especially if anything goes out of the ordinary, it needs to be heavily documented.
Piggyback on that, Kelly. If that's so true, and you don't want to rely on my calculus professors used to say that you don't want to rely on your forgettery is what he would call it. But if it had something to do with like chickens or something, you'd be like, oh, the chicken load. Yeah, I remember the chicken load.
Yeah.
You lost a whole bunch, but still there's details, you know, delve into details. You want to be able, and I can and I bet Kelly was super busy early and he had to figure it out. And if you don't have the right mentorship or somebody that can give you that that leg up, you learn the hard way. And over documenting can easily be very helpful. And Kelly brought in a very big thing. When you bring in another party, like insurance and things like that for claims, you got to have your T's crossed and your I's dotted, or they could potentially cause you to pay for something which they were obligated to pay for because you can't substantiate the claim clearly enough. And that I know that has happened a couple of times in the setting of logistics and things of that nature.
A lot.
Yeah,
I mean, insurance look for
They count
any
on it.
reason not to pay on that.
Yeah, they count on it. That's their thing. They try to find it.
You got to be very good about that documentation, and covers everybody in that scenario. Yes, Randy.
Dude, IT departments usually have forms that when you go out to the field or when you're taking a phone call where you have to answer certain questions so that you don't forget things, or should we make one for ourselves that we keep, you know what I'm saying? Like just to have.
The answer for that is it depends. Depends on your company.
It
So
does.
your company may not have these policies and procedures in place, especially if you're working for a smaller mid-sized company. And if you're in a smaller mid-sized company in IT, you're likely wearing multiple hats, and you will have to come up with a lot of this stuff in order to kind of protect yourself and the company. So you may walk into a scenario where the person who was there before you didn't create, data integrity programs for backups, or what to do in case of emergency if you have to go out into the field, what kind of documentation is needed, disaster recovery. So I mean, like, it could be like none of this stuff is in place and you actually have to create it. Or it could be a startup. Like if it's a small company that's just getting their feet off the ground, they need somebody to come in and create all this stuff from scratch. And the beautiful part is you can go out and look at other people's documentation, kind of duplicate it yourself. So, and then kind of build from there and tweak it to fit, your personal needs for the company. But a lot of it comes down to, it depends on the organization you're in. In larger organizations, it's going to have a much more rigid structure where you go on site. This is what you fill out. This is your, policies and procedures. You take place, and here are the requirements for when you get back, so you may have much more rigid standard operating procedures in a large company. In smaller companies, it may be a little more lax or fluid, and you're going to have to rely more on your own skills. and your own memory. So it comes down to the company a lot of times.
And also continuous improvement. You may have a document that you work off of, but as time has gone on, Renzi, you notice that, hey, I don't need this, or I can clean it up. One big thing, even working in my past in healthcare, I was fortunate enough that a lot of things were in place, but when it wasn't, guess who was making the protocol? I was. If I had the issue happen to me, I made the protocol. So if it happened to somebody else, we had documentation in place on how to address it. Because the biggest thing, and Kelly has said this a couple times before, time is money. And if you are fumbling over an issue that people have known has happened once before, what happened? Who dropped the ball here? Who took care of the problem the first time? Why isn't there any documentation or protocol in place? Why can't we reference a ticket number of the last time this happened in order to address it? All those things, it kind of rub the powers that be in the wrong way. So I've never allowed the same issue to be an issue more than once if I was a part of that first issue, because I had somewhere I can go to, be it some notes that I took that I kept on my own PC or in a binder, or if I created a protocol. And you are heavily relied on to do that because, I mean, it's a team sport, you know, so you're not there every day, but that problem can happen on the day that you're off. And instead of being the one that they call on your off day, because they'll do that, you'll want to say, hey, yeah, it's oh, that was ticket 77354. Just look at the ticket. It'll have the resolution in it.
Exactly. All right. Well, here's a side-by-side view of both of those, and we can kind of see the stark differences between them. Come in here. Boom. Yeah, date and time, who we talked to, program that is at issue, what kind of error they're receiving. This is preventing her from completing her work. So that gives you a sense of urgency. So, you know, where is this as far as like scalability and urgency and stuff like that? We'll talk about that tomorrow when we get into elevating tickets. And also plan of action. You know, we said we were going to remote into her computer at 5:30 p.m. So you set an alarm on your calendar that you're going to follow up on this, and this is your course of action. So there's a lot more detail other than just, you know, she has unknown problem from unknown she, and you know, hopefully at some point it should be fixed. All right, here is the 8 criteria you should try to keep in mind for effective note-taking and documentation. First, get the client's full name, first and last name. If by chance, this does happen quite often, there are more than one person at the company with the same name, get a middle initial or a department, something along those lines that will help identify who that person is, because it does happen. Record the date and time you spoke to the client. Each time you speak to the client, you need to notate that I talked to the client at X time. I talked to the client at X time, so that they can see the follow-ups that are happening. So each time you talk to the client, note the date and time. Use standard English and correct grammar. Be concise. You don't need, it's not a dissertation. You don't need a 600-page essay on all the complications going on Bill's computer. Basically just need to know, hey, we're getting an application error every time they try to open up Adobe Acrobat. So be concise, because Bear in mind, the person coming behind you, it's going to take time for them to read these notes, and we want them to be able to get the pertinent information as quickly as possible so they can solve the same issue if it comes up again. All right, include important details about the case. What are the specific errors? What are the specific programs being affected? Things like that. Note any circumstances that make the ticket urgent. Is there a workaround to where the employee can continue to operate at this time? So you're able to work around it. It's not the most optimal thing. Like if their Outlook application on their desktop has crashed and is not working at all. That's unfortunate, but you can log into Outlook 360 on the internet. It doesn't work quite as good, but it is a workaround. They're still able to function. That's very different from I can't open this program and I can't do my job at all. So there's a different set of urgency there. So we need those details in place so we can understand what the urgency is with regards to dealing with the client. Now, record any specific actions the IT professional or client plans to take and a timeline for follow-up and or repair. So any specific things that you have attempted, whether they succeeded or failed, need to be documented. I tried doing a restart. I tried defragmenting the hard drive. I tried reconnecting to the DHCP server. You know, whatever it is, you need to document what it is you attempted to do, whether it succeeded or failed, just so if the issue occurs again, people know to possibly skip over these steps and maybe jump to the final solution to save them time. So these are the 8 things you want to try to keep in mind when taking the notes. All right. I don't know if we have this document, Marvin, do we? All right. Just to reiterate, we're talking about the 8 criteria for effectiveness in documentation. Number 1, record the client's full name so we know who we're talking to. 2, date and time you closed the ticket on the back end. 3, use standard English and correct grammar. 4, be concise. 5, summarize the issue the client has reported. 6, explain the diagnosis, how you came to those conclusions. 7, record the steps taken to solve the problem, and then be specific so that those who come behind you know exactly what you did in order to correct this. You don't need to give a full map detail like I clicked here, then I clicked here, then I clicked here. No, I mean, you can be a lot more concise than that and just explain exactly what you did to fix the problem. Okay. What's the difference between note-taking and documenting? What do we think? Pause it real quick. All right, to sum this one up, are there any questions so far as to note-taking and no questions? All right. Well, now, as of the close of this, we should now be able to explain the role of note-taking when reading and resolving tickets. We should list the principles, be able to list the principles of effective note-taking and documenting tickets. Evaluate simple notes to determine how to improve the notes based on the criteria we have set for success, and write effective notes and documentation that capture a summary of the problem, the likely causes of that problem, and the solutions that we came to.